Welcome to the second episode of Under Control. My name's Paul Bartlett, and on today's show, I sit down with Christoffer Lindblad, who is a partner and co-founder of the Swedish company Pelago. Pelago specialises in leadership services, ranging from executive interim management to CEO and board services for several public listed enterprises in Scandinavia. During the show, we will discuss how technology influenced their industry and how security plays a crucial role in client collaboration. Hey, Christoffer, nice having you on the show today.
Hi there, nice to be here.
Yeah, good to have you with us today, and thanks for taking the time to join us. So getting underway, what I'd like to ask you is just give me a little bit of background about yourself and your organisation, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm one of the founding partners of Pelago, which is a Nordic leadership services firm. So we're sort of a smaller boutique firm competing with the large international players within the leadership services segment. So basically what we are helping clients with is finding their new CEO or finding their new chairman or actually assessing and developing their senior executives. So making sure our clients have the best possible leadership team on board. That's pretty much what we do.
Right. Okay. And how long have you been going?
Well, we started this firm 3 years ago when four of us came from a larger firm. So we broke out and tried the life as entrepreneurs, basically, and have been privileged to be successful so far.
Good. And do you have some pretty big customers yourself that you're interacting with? I mean, do you deal with bigger organizations, or is it mainly mid-size or small companies? How is your business working on a day-to-day basis?
Well, one could of course think that since we're a smaller firm, I think we're like 10 consultants, we would mostly work with smaller firms, but it actually that's not the way it works. So
right.
we're working with many of the larger Nordic listed companies, the larger state-owned companies, and we're working with the Swedish government in assessing key leaders to them and so on. So we have a wide range of quite interesting customers. And also, of course, given the development within the private equity sector, I would say maybe 30-40% of our revenue is triggered by private equity owned companies.
Well, that's interesting. So you've got a broad range of experience and interactions with different customers that you've dealing with different leadership styles for sure.
Yeah, I would say it would range from, I mean, true bureaucratic authorities and governmental agencies to the smaller startups, as long as they are private equity owned, I would say. So it's a huge range.
Yeah. And your team's made up of basically all consultants, or you've got different specialities that you bring to the table for the customers?
Basically, we have two types of consultants. One are the certified psychologists who are doing the senior assessments and using all the psychology tests and so on, the aptitude test. And then we have persons with background like myself from consultancy. I myself is from a leading sort of law firm, and then we have the usual suspects from the McKinseys and the Bain and so on, management consultants having moved into our area.
Okay, and of course, this shows a bit about technology and a bit about security and various others all mixed together with business. What technology do you deploy or do you use to support your business?
Well, I would say over the past 5 to 10 years, we've seen a huge shift from quite sort of old-fashioned ways of working with sort of pen and paper and paper CVs and so on. And I would say we have the whole range of technical support tools. We have everything from our online cloud-based candidate database, which I think is sort of based in England, but we are accessing it from our cloud-based computers in Sweden. And then since we're working so flexible, so our consultants have the technology, so they basically, if they work from home or from our office, it's the same technology setup. So I would say we have the whole range, but of course now over the past year or so, we have moved very quickly into a lot of sort of team or Zoom meetings, and we're sending all our contracts, for example, digitally. So we have like the sort of online signatures and since we are working with so sensitive information, I would say one of the biggest leaps we took is sending them securely online, because I have to be honest, looking back maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we were sending quite sensitive information, just through email, which of course is not, it's like sending a postcard.
Yeah.
via the normal mail. It doesn't work. So we have the whole range of tools, I would say. We've gone quite digital, I would say.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned it was like in the last five years, because I still know some of my customers that are just doing that transformation now, from pen and paper, and sometimes that's down to the actual client themselves who doesn't want to move on. And I think you mentioned before that you come from the legal background, and I certainly still deal with some legal customers who are still struggling to move away from pen and paper, let's say. So how was the transition for you? Was that quite a simple transition to move across? Was it just a natural progression, or was there some kind of let's say some growing pains with moving with the technology? How did you find it to adapt with that?
That's an interesting question. I think firstly, when we founded our firm 3.5 years ago, we decided as founders that we would go digital at once. Right. We would sort of strive for having those kind of solutions, and also even with things like our invoicing and so on, how we invoice our clients should be totally online. So of course we increase the speed of that process by making that decision. But then also if you look at Stockholm, where we have our headquarters, it's a true startup scene, a lot of innovative tech companies. So our customers, I would say a large proportion of our customers are either based in Stockholm or in one of the other Nordic capitals. And I would say we have been sort of benefiting from our clients pushing us into, they're expecting more and more. So I would say it's probably different if you work across other kind of geographies, I guess. And then also, since the new generation of leaders are moving into the executive scene, they are expecting faster solutions, more online solutions. So they just have a different kind of expectations, and we need to meet those.
Yeah. And I think that's partly to what you do as well, isn't it? Because, you're in the executive scene where you're coaching leadership, you're consulting with leadership. And I suppose one of the things that I noticed from your webpage is that you want to move them forward into as long as technology is moving forward. And there was always a few years ago the talk about sustainability and what that needs to be considered for in leadership style. And now I suppose technology is also one of those, because we hear so much about digital transformation. What does that actually mean, that digital transformation? But I suppose every time a new group of leadership comes through or something moves forward, then you need to reposition yourselves, or you need to educate that kind of leadership that you engage with. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct. And you can see a lot of larger clients, they have an internal struggle with the sort of more senior leaders not wanting to adapt, and they have a younger generation coming up, and then there's at some point a shift, and some of them wins. Usually the younger generation, to be honest, they usually win. But then I think if you look at more of we are working with some governmental agencies. They are still, I wouldn't say that they are old-fashioned, but they are locked into some regulations in how things should be done. So there we see much more pen and paper, much more physical meetings. It has to be done sort of in a certain way. So I think also it depends on the digital transformation is going in different paces depending on the industries, I would say, because they have different preconditions. Yeah,
understood. And of course, we always see that potentially government tends to move, or lags a little bit behind some of the other areas. I wouldn't say in every area, but with those kind of organizations, is how much effort or approach does it take on your part to move or change the mindset of leadership with respect to bringing them forward into up to date with technology and and potentially, as you mentioned, regulation as well, because regulation is always changing. And that's another thing that everybody has to adapt to, along with GDPR, as you mentioned just a second ago.
Yeah, I would say it's an interesting thing that let's take, for example, the fact that we are making extensive assessments of different executives. And just to give you an example, we might work with an organization where we are meeting a senior executive for a day or so, making psychological tests and structured interviews. And then maybe we are running 10 reference calls on that person from a 360 perspective, trying to find out what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and so on of this person. And then we put this into an extensive report, which we send to the candidate and then provide it also orally, of course. And it's interesting that for us, it's obvious that we need to, send that in a sort of secure manner, through some in a crypted script or so. But we actually have some interesting dialogues with clients who still say, you can just send it over, no one will see it. And it's like, and they are still a bit naive when it comes to what can be traced online, what are the challenges and threats and then security threats. So it's, sometimes we're actually educating our clients and saying to them that, even if you want to have this sent via email, we won't do it because it's our reputation, and we won't put that up for risk, sort of.
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues, is that people get stuck in so much of a routine, and they're used to email. We see it a lot as well, that people are just making, just send it to me in email. It's fine to send it into an email, or, we send a link out to a customer, potentially an encrypted link, and they don't want to click on the link because they've been told not to click on the link.
Exactly.
And it gets all kind of lost in translation. Well, what am I supposed to do? And the organization said, well, we don't want you clicking on links. You shouldn't be open. You as a client or as a customer to your clients don't want to send stuff in email, because that's an insecure way. So it's one of those things which I believe needs to be addressed and sorted out going forward. That, is email, for example, still relevant from that perspective, that we just throw attachments in there and we send stuff out, especially with the kind of information that you're dealing with, or we really now still have to look at another way of doing things, like GDPR is here now. As you mentioned, something very interesting, that your reputation's at stake. So it's important for you, when you're dealing with confidential information, that you're also delivering that confidential information in a confidential manner, right?
Yeah, I would say at the end of the day, at our level, we're selling, of course, our expertise and so on. But at the end of the day, we're basically selling trust. We're selling that they can trust us. And clients are expecting us to do the thinking, basically. So we have to be the ones thinking about risks, and what kind of risks would it pose to send this via email, and not just rely on the client saying yes or no. Because since, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, we're quite often recruiting CEOs or CFOs for listed companies, and in some cases that would consider also insider information. So it's a double risk. It's both that it can personal data can leak, sensitive data can leak, but it can actually also trigger a situation where we have leaked insider information through our systems, and that would be the end of our firm. Bye. We would just have to pack our bags and rebuild under a new name, basically. So there's a lot at risk here, I would say. And then my impression is that people start to think about that once it happens. It seems to be hard to sort of imagine in advance how large the risks are, really.
And I think that's part of what you do as well, as we mentioned earlier about leadership, is when you're looking to recruit and with candidates and deal with candidates, is it a situation now where you're looking at them and understanding, from a sustainability perspective, that's one thing, they tick the box on that. There's different leadership's technology they understand, but does the modern leader also need to have a perspective now around security and what that means for an organization, especially because we saw GDPR come in just more than a year ago now? And are you looking for those or is it important for organizations to find those security conscious leaders? Is it something that the market looks for, that they should already be like that? Or is it very much an educational situation that you need to bring them up to speed, you need to educate them, certainly with executive selection?
Well, I would say at sort of the CEO or sort of head of a division level, where it's more like general management positions, it really comes into the requirement or the candidate profile a lot. And then it's called digital skills, or being sort of open for digital solutions and being great at driving digitalization and so on. But it quite rarely moves into sort of subsections like cybersecurity and so on. So I at this stage it's more like finding digital leaders, and sometimes that's connected to being great at managing an organization through sort of cybersecurity risks and so on. But sometimes I'm afraid it's more that you're really open to developing sexy apps and so on, and for the B2C market. So no, and then I probably, if I continue just reflecting on that, the next generation of leaders are so tech savvy already. I mean, the ones that are perhaps like 35 at this stage and perhaps will move into their first sort of CEO positions within the next 5 years or so before they turn 40. They are already, I mean, I would say they are sort of, they grew up in a world where there are cyber threats, where there are threats to their IT systems and so on. And I actually had a client just the other day that said that, hey, Christoffer, we have, because I asked, he's sort of running a plus 10,000 or employee organization in the Nordics, and he said, we had the pandemic, that was a big crisis, but then of course we had a big IT crash here earlier this year, and I would say that was 10 times tougher than the pandemic, he said.
Right.
So it has a lot of effect on the organizations, the whole IT, the security setup.
Yeah, because I think, when we talk to people in various different kinds of business, certainly small to medium-sized business, not so much medium-sized, but certainly small businesses, security is not always at the forefront of what they're doing, even if they're working in a sensitive field like in financial services or they're working in the legal sector. Convenience is still topped as number one, so they want APIs, they want to have connections, and make life a lot easier for themselves. And I think what we're seeing at the moment, there's a little bit of pain and gain between moving over to a more secure system, or not even necessarily a system, but it's about a business process and changing the way of people working. And typically when there is a breach, it's down to a group of individuals or an individual. Sometimes, where there's ransomware going around, there's all sorts of different possibilities that can infiltrate or create a security problem for you. But I certainly see that, again, that there's sometimes just that ability to be able to change or be able to think security conscious, and be conscious of the things that you need to adopt, or maybe different ways of working and changing to make your business a more secure environment. And it's not just dependent on the technology. And I was curious to see where your organization yourselves that do that, and obviously the way that some of your customers are trying to move towards that as well.
Well, if you look at our organization, and that goes actually way back in my leadership, we've been focusing a lot on sort of creating, because you can have all kinds of rules and procedures and so on, but at the end of the day, as you say, it's about behaviors and about having sort of automatic behaviors within yourself that you have learned over time. So actually, if you look at when we are onboarding new employees and when we are training them during the first couple of years, we have regular discussions, and I'm one of the partners who have those trainings with new employees, when we actually go through different kind of situations that consultants can encounter during a week or so, or a month, when it comes to security issues, how to deal with confidential information, it could be anything from how do you treat your cell phone in public transport, how do you, if you work outside the office in a cafe, what should you think about? I mean, especially for the younger consultants, they haven't been around for 20 years, so you have to give them examples of what situation they can end up in, so they have this in their DNA. Because once a true security breach might be happening, it won't look exactly like my example, but at least they're trained in spotting them. And so that's what we are aiming for. And I would say most of our clients are doing the same in either very structured forms or when it comes to larger organizations, they have huge structures for, with guidelines and policies. And then of course, I'm not sure that everyone is following them, but they have quite high ambitions, at least, when it comes to the security of data and security of IT.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the GDPR a bit more, because that's always an interesting topic. And, it started all that time ago, and it seems like everyone's, are you GDPR compliant? Well, there's a certain thing to being GDPR compliant, or can you make us GDPR compliant? Certainly here at Treasurer HQ, we can help you with that, for example. But I think there's still a feeling out there, or the impression that I'm getting, that people are still not on top of GDPR as much as they say that they're making moves in the right direction. I think there are certain people within organizations that they've got a security officer, but I think as it spreads across a wider organization, that still people are not completely sure of what they should be, what would make them GDPR compliant, for example, what personal identifiable information is considered to be under GDPR, what is not considered to be under GDPR. So, there's still a bit of confusion out there with the regular employees that are working. And I think certainly during the COVID situation now, it's like, what now? We were working in the office, everything was on-prem, and now we're all working remotely. What challenges does that present? And be interested to get your insight from yourself, but also if you've got any insights from either other companies that you know of, or the market in general that you work within, about the challenges that the current situation's brought about.
I've been around for a while, so I've been following the GDPR development quite closely, and I think what we did, which ended up very successfully, but it took us some time to really sort of land in that conclusion, is that I think many companies and firms, they see GDPR as a kind of a burden and something that's imposed on them, and they have to, you're using the word, you have to comply with it. So we took the approach when we started Pelago 3 years ago, when we actually had the opportunities to start with a fresh plate, so to speak, because we didn't have any, existing systems, and we started as a greenfield, so it was a startup operation, and we say that, hey, let's see how we can use the structure and the rules of GDPR to our benefit. And so we say, okay, we have to map our processes and see, when we're using personal data and how we store it. And instead of just see that as a bureaucratic operation that we had to do, we integrated that into our business processes. So I would actually say that our data, and we have seen huge advantages and opportunities having GDPR. It might sound strange, but we have ended up with better data. We have more accessible data. We know what kind of personal data we have. Our candidates and clients, they can much more easily access the, sort of clean data, because we are, regular sort of deleting data, which we shouldn't have on board. So I would say, to put it simply, when we do a CEO search, headhunting for a CEO, or when we are assessing a senior executive, I mean, we can describe that in many fancy words, but we're actually embarking on a big mapping exercise. We're trying to map candidates, map data, and draw conclusions from that. So actually, I would say GDPR has improved our ability to run our services, then of course there are sort of threats to also to us. But I would say that's one way of going about it. But I would say that's not the most typical way thing I hear from our clients. Most of our clients see it as a burden, something that's imposed on them.
And Christoffer, could you just give me an example of where GDPR, like a specific example where it's benefited your business processes or your interactions with potential candidates?
Well, I can give you at least, two different examples. One is that one of the conclusions we drew when working with one of the larger law firms here in the Nordic area who helped us out with the GDPR compliance was that, how do we make sure that for the candidates we know the best and the candidates that we have followed over the years, how do we make sure we have the right consent and the right legal authority to store all of their information? And since we have now built a very sort of an online system where we can easily update the consent the candidates are giving us and update, when we're requesting additional information from a candidate we know well. Actually, it has ended up in a situation where, the Nordic market is not that large when it comes to senior executives, which means that the level of quality of the data we have on our, within quotation marks, best candidates are even better now. And we know for sure that we can use the information we have because we have the right consent and so on. And so that's one of the advantages. A second advantage of the GDPR rules has been that in the past, firms like ours used to just, throw in candidates into the candidate base. Just, we might need this name at some point, and you would end up with too many, basically data, which was more like garbage, which sort of made it harder for us to draw the right conclusion. So with the GDPR regulations, we have to delete data regularly, that we have not the right to have. So it has ended up, we have cleaner data, so to speak. So I think when we talk GDPR within our organization, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a fun topic, but it's not a negative topic. But just the final, on the final note there, the most important thing if we link that to sort of digital solutions, the main reason our consultants think that the way we work with GDPR has improved their life is that we have moved totally online when it comes to asking for candidate consent, updating consent, storing their consent. It's all in the cloud and it's all email based, which means that when they talk to a candidate and they can see that, hey, we don't have the right GDPR consent there, it's just one click and then it goes to the candidate's email. And so it's so easy now. So that's why they like it, I think.
Yeah. And I just an idea popped into my head. I was trying to make a comparison there between, merger and acquisitions in a way. And it's basically, if you were creating a data room in the cloud these days, instead of sending CVs backwards and forwards on emails or contracts or vice versa, you've got that space up there, securely up there potentially. And I'm being agnostic here. I'm talking about what the technology and cloud technology is available to create that space where you can control different users and accesses that. And it just makes it that much more convenient and much more streamlined, as well as having something which is really useful, I think, for GDPR, which is having a digital trail these days, an audit trail to demonstrate. Do you also see that the same way?
Yeah, I'm totally, and actually our lawyers told us quite early on, they said, hey guys, it will not be the sort of data supervisory authority that will knock on your door. The thing that will happen that will make you shake is that one of your large clients will knock on your door and they will say, hey, we need to do an audit on all our larger partners. So, please within 2 weeks, fill in these forms and tell us that you're GDPR compliant. That will make you shake.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's and the solution we decided to go for was that we have actually mapped all our processes in a database that's accessible via a link and a password. So we can, if an authority knocks on our door, or if a client knocks on our door, we'll just give them the link and the password, and they can sort of go on an excursion and look at, our processes and the kind of decisions we've made on how we are complying with GDPR. But then, to be totally honest, I mean, I'm not naive here. Then, of course, we as an organization always have a way to go in fully implementing. I mean, it's one thing saying that we are working like this in process A, but then we need to make sure that 100% of our employees are doing that. And that's a continuous journey. There's no organization out there that can say that they are 100% compliant when it comes to GDPR behavior.
Yeah, I agree. And how do you, I mean, now we're stuck in very unusual times, which of course have impacted all of us, and it's not a topic we can ignore. And certainly from technology perspective, as you mentioned, you've already been there, but have you had to make any changes, as well as some of us as well? I mean, you mentioned already that you've got the capability to work from home, but is there anything different about now than what you were doing before?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge change, and I think the plans, we actually had a kickoff in mid-February when we said that 2020 would be the year when Pelago would, take a big, giant digital leap, and due to the very, very tragic Corona pandemic, instead of achieving that during 2020, we achieved that mid-March 2020. So I mean, when this hit the Nordic area in early March, I would say the first phase was a bit, clients and candidates were unsure of how to behave. So some were moving home very quickly, some were still at the office, and there were a couple of weeks where we were sort of, some were sitting at home, some were in the office. But then quite early, sort of from the 10th of March or so on, we decided that we will not sit around waiting for our clients to make up their mind how they want us to work. So we just decided that we will run Pelago from remotely for a while. So actually we moved the whole firm online mid-March or so, and we have done that now for since then, and basically running all our meetings via Zoom or Teams and being online totally. So we actually moved the whole firm online for a quarter or so, and just before the summer break here, we started to move some of our employees back into the office and having a schedule that, some people working Tuesdays, some Thursdays, and so on. So it's a huge change, I would say.
Yeah, and I think also from my own experience here is that we've got some colleagues that kind of like the home office, and others that want to get back into the office. And it leaves a big question mark, I think, about going into the future, about whether we need that much office space anymore, or we're going to have people working 3 days a week in the office, 2 days a week, hot desking. So a lot of different, I think, things that came up early, which maybe have been considered more more years down the line, are suddenly here at our doorstep and having to make that decision. Because of COVID.
Yeah, put the perspective also on, what will the modern city look like going forward? What will the modern office look like? And it's quite interesting questions that I think will take a couple of years before we really know where we end up.
And with regards to, you mentioned that you moved out everything remotely as well. What about the interactions with your customers and candidates? Because obviously they've moved remotely as well. I'm talking to people either on Teams or on Zoom invitations. And I'll be honest with you, what I'm finding is that, in fact, people are giving you more time now to speak on Zoom, maybe because they're working from home. Or I had a really good conversation the other day with a gentleman in Boston, and it seems like they can find a bit more time for you now to be able to sit down and talk to you and talk about not just the solution, but other things that are going on. And I just found that very interesting. I'm not sure if you're also experiencing that as well. I hope so.
Yeah, we are experiencing that. Then but we also had we also been sort of reflecting on, because we've been managing quite well during these couple of months, and we've been reflecting a bit why that's have been, why has it been like that. And I mean, since we've been around for a while, and we have extensive networks, we have a lot of client relationships that go 10, 15 years back. Those candidates and clients are more accessible, much more accessible now, because they're sitting at home in the basement, and they want to chit chat and so on. But it will be interesting if this pandemic drags on for, let's say, another year or so. What will happen to more like new relationships, and because that I personally still find harder to develop that kind of relationship over Zoom. To be honest, I think there's something about just having a cup of coffee somewhere, meeting live. It's hard to sort of replace.
I think I would tend to follow that sentiment as well. And just being conscious of time here, so I just want to get your feelings about what direction, what's the future for your organisation going in, and particularly the market in general. I won't say post-COVID, because at this time we don't know, but what's your predictions for the future, either for your own market, for the way that you're working with technology? Do you see that there's potential to constantly evolve your businesses and services from using, as you mentioned, you're already fully in the cloud now? What else do you see on the horizon?
Well, I see some I would say key trends that they might come faster or slower due to the pandemic, but they are not triggered by the pandemic. And one within our industry is a quite strong force, and that is linked to digitalization and automation and so on. And it goes back to the fact that if we go back like 5 years ago, our business has been quite old-fashioned and not using a lot of digital tools. And since we are dealing with so much data, to be honest, when it comes to CEO's background or the kind of clients we work with, we will move quite quickly into more automatic processes where we perhaps, let's say we have a CEO search, and the 10 final candidates are assessed also online through an automatic search, where we go through certain aspects of their life just automatically, because it's it's an automatic process. And then of course you have the ability for computers to assess candidates, which I hate to say it, but some research points to the fact that computers are better at assessing candidates than headhunters. Let's see how that goes, but it's a clear digital trend within so that's one very, very clear trend. The second one is, given the kind of challenges most our organizations are facing with, the climate change, it's the pandemic, you have the polarization of our societies and so on. You have huge generation shifts in Europe, where the older ones are moving into retirement and fewer younger ones needs to support them. The demand for what we call truly sustainable leaders that the demand is greater than ever. So you're having compassionate, long-term, visionary leaders who both can be sort of rational in their decision making, but do that with a warm heart. That's hard to come across, but will be so much more important going forward. And then finally, at least in Europe, the demand from our clients that we as a business are not just diverse and inclusive in the way we run our firm, but that we really help them in achieving more diverse and inclusive organizations. So because that's something that we have just seen. We have just seen the tip of the iceberg there. That will come so much faster within the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think just to wrap up for the the listeners out there, which is the what you've learned over the years of being involved in your business and running your business, what's
the two biggest tips that you would give either to maybe those that are already in business that are kind of find themselves in a difficult situation now where they haven't maybe done a full transition to using cloud technologies. I was to speak to some that are still using on-premise. What's the two biggest things that have changed your way of working and moved your company forward?
The two biggest things that have changed our way of working. That's what you mean?
Yes, yeah. The way of working or taking your company, forward, evolved your company.
I would say there's a lot of things have been going on over these years, but I would say that the first one that has changed our way of working dramatically has been moving from pen and paper CVs, having assessment in a physical room, and moving everything online, because that has made us much more accessible. It has made it more accessible for candidates. It has made a huge difference. And the second one, it's more philosophical change that has ended up in quite dramatic changes for us, and that has been everyone is talking about being client-centric and asking the client, what do they want and so on. But we ended up in a conclusion where we started our firm 3 years ago that, our kind of industry is not that big, and our clients they are specialized in something else. So we can't just ask the clients all the time what they want, because they really don't know. So we took a different approach and said that, we have to lead the way. We have to tell our clients that this is the way we work, or this is the way we want to work. How does that fit into your way of working? And that has made a dialogue with the clients much more concrete and much more dynamic, I would say, because we have made up our mind from our side. What do we want to achieve? And then, of course, we need to be flexible towards the client, but instead of just asking these so my advice to some people starting up their business, that of course you should ask your clients how they want the service and so on, but you have to make up your own mind also. What do you want? and try to convey that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Christoffer, it's been fantastic insight from learning from your company and from your insights about what Pelago is doing, and also certainly about the situation that we all find ourselves in at the moment. I wish you all the best, and thanks a lot for joining us on this podcast today.
It was a privilege. Nice talking to you.
Appreciate that. Okay. Thanks a lot.
And that's it for today's episode of Under Control. You can find links to all of our social platforms and to our guests in the episode description. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Join us in 2 weeks' time for the next episode.